What's the cruelest punishment you ever got for something you didn't do? I was 15 when the Henderson County School Board accused me of hacking their entire computer network and stealing standardized test answers. The accusation came on a Tuesday morning in October, delivered by our vice principal, Mr. Morrison, who pulled me out of third period chemistry and walked me to his office without explanation. "We have evidence you accessed restricted district files," he said, sliding a manila folder across his desk. Inside were printouts of server logs showing my student ID number associated with unauthorized logins to the district's administrative system. The timestamp showed activity at 2:30 in the morning on dates going back 3 months. I stared at the papers, genuinely confused. "I don't understand. I've never even tried to log into anything besides the student portal." Mr. Morrison leaned back in his chair and studied me with the expression of someone who had seen too many lying teenagers. "The evidence is clear, Marcus. Your student credentials were used to access confidential test materials and grade databases. The IT department has been tracking this for weeks. What I didn't know was that my student ID number had been compromised during a data breach at a third-party educational software company 3 months earlier. The breach had exposed login credentials for over 40,000 students across 12 school districts, but Henderson County's IT department either missed the security bulletin or failed to act on it. Someone had been using my credentials to systematically steal test materials and sell them to students willing to pay for answers. The school's IT coordinator, a man named Dennis Kruger, had been conducting his investigation without consulting outside security experts or following proper digital forensics procedures. He had simply looked at the server logs, seen my student ID number, and concluded I was the perpetrator. No one had bothered to check whether my credentials might have been stolen or used by someone else. "We're suspending you immediately, pending a full investigation," Mr. Morrison said, already reaching for the phone to call my parents. "This is a serious matter that could result in criminal charges." My mother arrived 20 minutes later, her face pale with confusion and anger. She worked as a nurse at the county hospital and had left in the middle of her shift. "There has to be some mistake," she kept saying as Mr. Morrison explained the evidence against me. "Marcus wouldn't do something like this." But the printouts looked damning. Page after page of server logs showing my student ID accessing administrative systems, downloading test files, and viewing grade databases. The activity had been methodical and sophisticated, suggesting someone with advanced computer skills and detailed knowledge of the school's network architecture. Dennis Kruger joined us in the office and spread out additional evidence on the conference table. He was a thin man in his 50s who spoke with the confidence of someone who had never been wrong about anything technical. "The intrusion pattern is consistent with someone who knows our system intimately," he said, pointing to highlighted entries in the logs. "This wasn't random hacking. Someone specifically targeted our most sensitive files." He showed us evidence of downloaded answer keys for upcoming advanced placement exams, altered grades for multiple students, and accessed personal information for teachers and administrators. The scope of the alleged intrusion was staggering. "We've had to invalidate 3 weeks of testing across the entire district," Kruger continued. "We're talking about thousands of students who will need to retake exams because the integrity of the testing process has been compromised." My mother looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Not anger exactly, but a kind of desperate hope that I would provide some explanation that made sense. "Marcus, tell them you didn't do this." "I didn't do this," I said, but even to my own ears it sounded weak. The evidence was right there in black and white. My student ID, my login credentials, detailed records of unauthorized access that would have required significant technical knowledge to accomplish. The suspension became indefinite that afternoon. The school board scheduled an emergency meeting for Thursday to discuss my case and determine whether to involve law enforcement. Word spread quickly through our small town that Marcus Chen, the quiet kid who helped teachers troubleshoot their computers, had been caught hacking the school district. My father came home from his accounting office that evening with tight lines around his eyes. 3 of his clients had already called, asking if the rumors about his son were true. "This is going to destroy our reputation," he said, sitting heavily at the kitchen table. "People are saying you stole test answers and sold them to other students." The local newspaper, the Henderson County Herald, ran a front-page story on Wednesday morning with the headline, "Student Accused of Major School Hack." The article described sophisticated cyber intrusion and potential criminal charges, while carefully avoiding using my name since I was a minor. But in a town of 8,000 people, everyone knew exactly who they were talking about. I spent that Wednesday at home, suspended from school, and watching my parents field phone calls from reporters, school board members, and curious neighbors. The house felt like a fortress under siege. My younger sister Emma came home from middle school crying because her friends were asking if her brother was going to jail. "The kids are saying you sold test answers for money," she said, her voice small and confused. "Mrs. Patterson asked me if our family was having financial problems." That hurt worse than anything the adults had said. Emma looked up to me, and now she was being humiliated at school because of something I hadn't done but couldn't prove I hadn't done. The school board meeting on Thursday night was packed. I sat between my parents in the front row of the high school auditorium, while 300 community members filled the seats behind us. The 5-member school board sat at a long table on the stage, flanked by the district superintendent and the school's attorney. Board Chairman William Hayes opened the meeting by reading a prepared statement about serious allegations of computer fraud and academic dishonesty. He emphasized that the board took cybersecurity threats very seriously and would cooperate fully with law enforcement if criminal charges were filed. Dennis Kruger presented his technical evidence to the board, using a projector to display the server logs and explaining the timeline of unauthorized access. He had prepared a detailed PowerPoint presentation that made the case against me look even more compelling than it had in Mr. Morrison's office. "The pattern of intrusion shows sophisticated knowledge of our network architecture," Kruger said, clicking through slides that highlighted specific log entries. "This wasn't a lucky guess or simple password cracking. Someone with intimate knowledge of our systems specifically targeted our most sensitive databases." Board member Patricia Williams asked about the possibility of stolen credentials or external hacking, but Kruger dismissed the suggestion. "The access pattern pattern is too specific and targeted. This shows insider knowledge that only a student or employee would possess. The district's attorney, a stern woman named Janet Ross, outlined the potential legal consequences I could face: computer fraud charges, theft of intellectual property, and conspiracy to commit academic fraud. If prosecuted as an adult, I could face up to 5 years in federal prison and substantial fines. The district has an obligation to protect the integrity of our educational system, Ross said. When that integrity is compromised, we must respond decisively. My parents had hired their own attorney, David Martinez, who tried to argue that the evidence was circumstantial and that proper digital forensics procedures had not been followed. But Martinez was a general practice lawyer who handled real estate closings and wills. He was clearly out of his depth when it came to cybersecurity issues. We request that the board allow an independent forensics expert to examine the evidence before making any final determinations, Martinez said. Rushing to judgment based on incomplete information serves no one's interests. But the board was under pressure from the state education department to resolve the situation quickly. The compromised test materials had affected the district's standing with the state, and there were concerns about losing federal funding if the security breach wasn't addressed promptly. Board member Robert Chen, no relation to my family, despite the shared surname, made a motion to refer the matter to the Henderson County Sheriff's Department for criminal investigation. The motion passed 4-1, with only Patricia Williams voting against it. This is a serious matter that requires law enforcement expertise, Chairman Hayes said, as he gavelled the meeting to a close. The district will cooperate fully with the criminal investigation while taking all necessary steps to protect our students and staff. I walked out of that auditorium, knowing that my life had fundamentally changed. People in the crowd stared at me and whispered to each other as we passed. Someone called out "hacker" from the back of the room, and nervous laughter rippled through the audience. The Sheriff's Department investigation began the following Monday. Detective Sarah Wilson, a middle-aged woman with 20 years of experience investigating white-collar crimes, was assigned to the case. She interviewed me for 3 hours at the sheriff's station while my parents and attorney waited outside. Detective Wilson was thorough and professional, but she clearly believed I was guilty. She asked detailed questions about my computer skills, my access to school systems, and my relationships with other students who might have purchased stolen test answers. "We know you did this, Marcus," she said during the second hour of questioning. "The evidence is overwhelming. What we need to understand is why you did it and who else was involved." I maintained my innocence throughout the interview, but Detective Wilson's questions revealed how much trouble I was in. She had already interviewed 6 students who had been caught with test materials that matched the stolen answer keys. 2 of them had told investigators they had purchased the answers from someone at the high school, but claimed they didn't know the person's identity. The detective had also discovered that someone had been using anonymous email accounts to advertise test answers for sale on social media platforms popular with local students. The emails had been sent from public computers at the town library, making them difficult to trace. "The timeline matches perfectly with the network intrusions," Detective Wilson explained. "Someone steals the test materials using your credentials, then starts selling them to students the next day. You're asking me to believe that's a coincidence." My parents hired a computer forensics expert, Dr. Amanda Foster from the State University, to examine the evidence independently. Dr. Foster had worked on dozens of cybersecurity cases and had testified as an expert witness in federal court. She agreed to review the school district's evidence for a fee of $5,000 that wiped out my college savings account. Dr. Foster's preliminary report, delivered 2 weeks later, raised serious questions about the school district's investigation. She found that Dennis Kruger had failed to follow basic digital forensics procedures and had potentially contaminated evidence by accessing the compromised systems after discovering the intrusion. "The investigation methodology is fundamentally flawed," Dr. Foster wrote in her report. "No effort was made to determine whether the student credentials had been compromised through external means. The server logs alone are insufficient to establish individual culpability. More importantly, Dr. Foster discovered that the school district's network had been vulnerable to a known security exploit that had been disclosed publicly 3 months earlier. The district had failed to install critical security patches, leaving their systems open to anyone with basic hacking knowledge. A competent security audit would have identified multiple vectors for unauthorized access," Dr. Foster's report continued. "The assumption that insider knowledge was required is not supported by the evidence. But by the time Dr. Keith Foster completed her analysis, the damage to my reputation was irreversible." The local newspaper had followed up their initial story with additional articles about the ongoing criminal investigation and the sophisticated cyber attack that had compromised the school district. My name still wasn't mentioned, but everyone in town knew who was being investigated. I had been out of school for 3 weeks when the Henderson County Sheriff's Department executed a search warrant on our house. Detective Wilson arrived with 4 other officers and a computer forensics specialist on a Thursday morning when my parents were both at work. They seized my laptop, desktop computer, and every storage device they could find. They took my cell phone, gaming console, and even my father's work computer from his home office. The forensics specialist spent 6 hours imaging hard drives and searching for evidence of the alleged crimes. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk to watch officers carry boxes of electronics out of our house. Emma came home from school to find yellow crime scene tape across our front door and strangers in our living room photographing everything. "Why are they taking Dad's computer?" she asked me, tears streaming down her face. "He doesn't even know how to use email properly." The search turned up nothing incriminating. My computers showed no evidence of hacking tools, stolen test materials, or communication with students who had purchased answers. But the absence of evidence was explained away by Detective Wilson as proof that I had been careful to cover my tracks. "Smart criminals know how to delete evidence," she told the newspaper reporter who covered the search. "We're working with federal experts to recover deleted files and trace digital footprints." The case dragged on for 2 months while I remained suspended from school. I was allowed to complete coursework at home, but I missed advanced placement exams, college campus visits, and the entire senior year experience I had been looking forward to. My grades suffered as I struggled to concentrate while living living under the cloud of potential federal charges. My parents' marriage began to crack under the pressure. They argued constantly about legal fees, media coverage, and whether they should consider moving to another town. My father blamed my mother for not monitoring my computer use more closely. My mother accused my father of caring more about his business reputation than supporting his son. The breakthrough came in December when Dr. Foster made a discovery that changed everything. While reviewing network logs that Dennis Kruger had initially dismissed as irrelevant, she found evidence of unauthorized access attempts from IP addresses registered to a known cybercriminal organization based in Eastern Europe. The intrusion pattern is consistent with credential stuffing attacks using stolen login databases, Dr. Foster explained to my parents and attorney during a meeting at her university office. Someone obtained your son's student credentials from an external source and used them to access the school's systems. She had traced the stolen credentials to a data breach at EduSoft Solutions, a company that provided online learning platforms to thousands of school districts. The breach had occurred in July, 3 months before the first unauthorized access to Henderson County's systems. My student credentials were among 47,000 that had been stolen and later sold on criminal marketplaces. The school district should have been notified of this breach and taken steps to reset all student passwords, Dr. Foster said. Their failure to do so left their systems vulnerable to exactly this type of attack. She had also discovered that the anonymous email accounts used to sell test answers had been created using the same IP addresses associated with the network intrusions. The cybercriminals had stolen the test materials and then sold them to local students using my compromised credentials to cover their tracks. Armed with Dr. Quaitley Foster's evidence, my attorney filed a motion to dismiss all charges. The motion included detailed technical analysis showing that the intrusions were the work of external criminals, not a local student. We also demanded that the school district conduct a proper security audit and implement basic cybersecurity measures to prevent future breaches. The Henderson County prosecutor, a cautious man named Thomas Bradley, reviewed the new evidence for 3 weeks before making his decision. He called a press conference on a snowy Friday afternoon in January to announce that all charges against me were being dropped. New evidence has come to light that exonerates the accused student, Bradley said, reading from a prepared statement. The investigation has revealed that the school district's computer systems were compromised by external criminals who used stolen credentials to access sensitive information. Bradley didn't apologize or acknowledge the months of public humiliation I had endured. He simply stated that the case was closed and that no further investigation would be conducted. The press conference lasted exactly 4 minutes. The school board held another emergency meeting the following week to discuss Dr. Foster's findings and the district's response to the security breach. This time, the auditorium was only half full, and the tone was markedly different from the October meeting where I had been publicly accused. Dennis Kruger gave a defensive presentation claiming that his investigation had followed standard procedures and that the external evidence was inconclusive. He argued that the school district had acted appropriately based on the information available at the time. Board member Patricia Williams, who had been the sole dissenting vote in October, asked pointed questions about why proper forensics procedures hadn't been followed. Did we consider the possibility that the student credentials had been compromised externally? Did we consult with cybersecurity experts before concluding that this was an inside job? Kruger's answers were evasive and technical, filled with jargon that the board members clearly didn't understand. It became obvious that he had made fundamental assumptions about the nature of the intrusion without conducting a thorough investigation. Superintendent Margaret Hayes announced that the district would hire an outside cybersecurity firm to conduct a comprehensive audit of their systems and procedures. She also stated that I would be allowed to return to school immediately with full credit for the work I had completed during my suspension. The district regrets any inconvenience this situation may have caused, Hayes said, using the passive voice to avoid taking direct responsibility. We are committed to ensuring that our cybersecurity measures meet the highest standards. I returned to Henderson High School on a Tuesday morning in February, 4 months after being suspended. Walking through the hallways felt surreal. Some students stared openly, while others whispered to their friends when they thought I wasn't looking. Teachers were polite but distant, clearly unsure how to interact with a student who had been publicly accused of serious crimes. My advanced placement physics teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, pulled me aside after class to apologize. I never believed you did it, he said quietly. The whole thing was ridiculous from the start. You're one of the most honest kids I've ever taught. But not everyone was supportive. Several parents had complained to the school board about allowing me to return, arguing that I was a security risk despite being cleared of all charges. A group of mothers organized a petition demanding that I be transferred to another school district. The social dynamics were complicated. Some of my former friends treated me like a celebrity, fascinated by my brush with the criminal justice system. Others avoided me entirely, apparently uncomfortable with the controversy that still surrounded my name. I found myself eating lunch alone most days, reading in the library instead of socializing. The worst part was the persistent doubt that lingered in some people's minds. Despite being officially exonerated, there were those who believed I had simply been lucky to avoid prosecution. I overheard conversations in the hallway suggesting that I had probably done it, but had good lawyers who found a technicality. My parents filed a lawsuit against the school district in March, seeking compensation for legal fees, damage to our family's reputation, and the educational opportunities I had lost during my suspension. The suit alleged that the district had failed to follow proper investigation procedures and had publicly accused me without sufficient evidence. The legal process was slow and contentious. The school district's insurance company hired a prestigious law firm to defend against our claims. They argued that the district had acted reasonably based on the evidence available at the time, and that my reputation had been protected by their refusal to release my name publicly. During depositions, it became clear that Dennis Kruger had been in over his head from the beginning. He admitted under oath that he had no formal training in digital forensics and had never investigated a cybersecurity incident before. He had simply assumed that the server logs told the complete story without without considering alternative explanations. I looked at the evidence and drew the most logical conclusion, Kruger testified. The student's credentials were used to access restricted systems. In my experience, that means the student was responsible. When asked about his experience with similar cases, Kruger acknowledged that this had been his first cybersecurity investigation. He had previously worked as a network administrator for a small business and had been hired by the school district primarily to maintain their computer lab equipment. The depositions also revealed that the district had received multiple warnings about the EduSoft breach but had failed to take action. They had received email notifications, security bulletins, and phone calls from the software company warning that student credentials might have been compromised. Dennis Kruger had deleted these warnings as spam without reading them carefully. Superintendent Hayes testified that she had been unaware of the security warnings and had relied entirely on Kruger's technical expertise. I trusted our IT coordinator to handle cybersecurity matters appropriately, she said. I had no reason to question his professional judgment. The case settled out of court in August for an undisclosed amount that covered our legal fees and provided some compensation for the harm to my reputation. The settlement agreement included a clause preventing both sides from discussing the details publicly, but it was widely understood that the district had paid a substantial sum to avoid a public trial. As part of the settlement, the school board issued a written statement acknowledging that I had been wrongfully accused and expressing regret for the procedural errors that had led to my suspension. They stopped short of a full apology, but the statement was published in the Henderson County Herald and posted on the district's website. Dennis Kruger quietly resigned from his position over the summer, citing family reasons for his departure. The district hired a cybersecurity consulting firm to overhaul their computer systems and implement proper security protocols. They also established new procedures for investigating potential breaches that required consultation with external experts. I graduated from Henderson High School in June with my class, but the experience had fundamentally changed my relationship with the community where I had grown up. The months of public suspicion and social isolation had left lasting scars that couldn't be healed by legal vindication or financial settlements. College applications had been a nightmare. Several admissions officers had asked about the incident during interviews, having heard rumors through their networks of guidance counselors and academic administrators. I had to explain repeatedly that I had been falsely accused and completely exonerated, but the shadow of the accusations followed me anyway. I ultimately enrolled at a state university 300 miles from Henderson County, partly because they offered a good computer science program, but mostly because I wanted to start fresh somewhere that nobody knew my story. My first semester was lonely and difficult as I struggled to trust new people and form genuine friendships. The cybersecurity incident had ironically sparked my interest in pursuing a career in computer security. I wanted to understand how systems could be compromised and how innocent people could be wrongfully accused when investigations were conducted improperly. My senior thesis examined the technical and procedural failures that had led to my false accusation. Dr. Foster became an informal mentor, helping me understand the complex intersection of technology, law, and justice. She hired me as a research assistant during my junior year, and I helped her investigate several other cases where students had been wrongfully accused of cybercrimes due to compromised credentials. Your case was unfortunately typical, Dr. Foster told me during one of our research sessions. School districts across the country are dealing with sophisticated cyber attacks, but most of them lack the expertise to investigate properly. They end up blaming the victims instead of identifying the real perpetrators. The experience taught me valuable lessons about the presumption of innocence, the importance of proper investigation procedures, and the lasting damage that false accusations can cause even when they're eventually proven wrong. It also showed me how quickly institutions can turn against individuals when they feel threatened or embarrassed. 5 years later, I work as a cybersecurity consultant, helping school districts improve their security practices and investigation procedures. I've testified as an expert witness in several cases involving wrongfully accused students, using my technical knowledge and personal experience to help others avoid what I went through. The Henderson County case became part of my professional reputation in an unexpected way. Instead of being known as the student who was falsely accused of hacking, I became known as the expert who helps prevent false accusations through proper investigation techniques. My relationship with my hometown remains complicated. I visit my parents during holidays, but I avoid the downtown area where I might run into former classmates or community members who remember the controversy. Emma, now in college herself, says some people still bring up the hacking incident when they learn she's my sister. The school district eventually hired me as a consultant to review their cybersecurity policies 3 years after my graduation. It was surreal walking through the same hallways where I had been suspended and returning to the administration building where I had been accused of serious crimes. Dennis Kruger had moved to another state and was working for a small computer repair shop. The new IT coordinator, a woman with proper cybersecurity credentials, had implemented comprehensive security measures and established protocols for investigating potential breaches that required external validation. During my review, I discovered that the district systems had been attacked twice more since my case, both times by the same Eastern European criminal organization. The new security measures had successfully prevented any data theft, and the investigations had correctly identified the attacks as external threats rather than blaming local students. Superintendent Hayes had retired, and Patricia Williams had been elected as the new board chairwoman. She made a point of thanking me personally for my consulting work and acknowledging the injustice I had suffered. "We learned important lessons from your case," she said. "Lessons that have made us better at protecting both our systems and our students." The consulting work was professionally satisfying, but emotionally difficult. Being back in the building where my reputation had been destroyed brought back all the feelings of helplessness and anger I had worked so hard to overcome. I completed the engagement successfully, but declined the district's offer to hire me for ongoing security monitoring. Today, I work with districts across the country to develop cybersecurity policies that protect both computer systems and individual rights. My standard presentation includes a case study based on my own experience experience, showing how procedural failures and technological ignorance can lead to devastating consequences for innocent people. The irony isn't lost on me that being falsely accused of cybercrime ultimately led to a successful career in cybersecurity, but I wouldn't recommend the experience to anyone. The months of suspension, public humiliation, and family stress were traumatic in ways that still affect me today. I still get anxiety attacks when I receive unexpected phone calls from unknown numbers, remembering how Detective Wilson used to contact me with updates about the investigation. I'm hypervigilant about computer security, constantly monitoring my accounts for signs of compromise that might lead to false accusations. The experience taught me that institutions are quick to protect themselves when they feel threatened, even if it means destroying innocent people's lives. It also showed me the importance of proper expertise and investigation procedures when dealing with complex technical issues. Most importantly, it demonstrated that being proven innocent doesn't undo the damage caused by false accusations. The months of public suspicion and social isolation left scars that legal vindication couldn't heal. Even today, more than a decade later, I sometimes Google my name to see if the old news articles still appear in search results. The Henderson County case became a cautionary tale in cybersecurity circles, frequently cited in academic papers and training materials as an example of how not to investigate cyber incidents. But for me, it will always be the time when the cruelest punishment wasn't detention or suspension, but having an entire community believe I was capable of betraying their trust. The settlement money helped pay for college and gave my family some financial security after the legal battle nearly bankrupted us, but no amount of money could compensate for the loss of innocence and trust that comes from being wrongfully accused of serious crimes in your own hometown. I've forgiven most of the people involved, understanding that they were reacting to incomplete information and institutional pressure, but I've never forgotten the lesson that institutions and communities can turn against individuals with frightening speed when fear and ignorance drive decision-making processes. The experience made me a better cybersecurity professional and a more empathetic person. It also made me determined to ensure that other innocent people don't suffer the same injustice due to inadequate investigation procedures and technological incompetence.